Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with more HOA stories. In this video, an HOA Karen sends workers to my property to cut my $75,000 tree without my permission. Let's dive right into the video. So 2 years ago, I spent a year abroad in a boarding school in England. It was quite an enjoyable experience, except for one small detail. Some of my schoolmates were absolute a-holes, which just enjoyed making people suffer for the sake of it. One of them was my roommate, and although he did not try to piss me off directly, he did to one of my friends. This guy was from Hong Kong and therefore his English level was not great. That, mixed with the fact that he was a bit weak and skinny, made him the ideal target for these kind of people. Once they took someone's shampoo and poured a little bit over his bed to make the rest of the boarding house think it was well, some other substance. It did not work though, but the fact that there was an attempt to make him go through that was enough to make us both create some kind of revenge. See, both the bully and I went to drama lessons, and some days after the incident, the teacher told us that we had a trip to London to watch The Lion King as part of our drama course. We had also been informed that we'd be arriving pretty late, 3 AM minimum. I saved the date, and just after we left for the trip I said, I need to go to the bathroom. So then I went to his room, took his shampoo and poured it all over his bed, his sheets and his pillows. I left the whole room as messy as I could and then left. The next day he had all his pajama plus uniform filled with shampoo. The head of house opened an investigation to see who was responsible for this, but I guess he was not very good at it because the first meeting he made started by telling me that I did not need to be there, as he certainly knew it was not me. This was supported on the fact that I was supposedly at London and that I was one of the best students of the school. I ended up having the most school merits by quite a margin. Anyway, the day I left the school to go back to Spain, I opened my phone to write a message on the house group chat and I said, "Remember the shampoo incident?" Someone answered, "Yes, why?" I was the one who did it. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious, do you still enjoy the petty revenge stories? I think it's nice to have variety in these kinds of videos, and honestly, malicious compliance and r/petty revenge are pretty much the two subreddits that are still the most active, so it's easiest to find new stories there. Anyway, if you enjoy my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel because we're getting closer and closer to 130,000 subscribers. And now let's continue to the title story. It is titled, Neighbor HOA Karen sends workers to my property to cut my $75,000 tree. So I got the short end of the straw with the fact that I live next door to a woman who is both a member of the HOA board and also a mega Karen. She 100% uses her position to get away with crap that nobody else would be allowed to do. One example is that she got 2 different construction projects approved in the same year, which expanded her house out closer to the property line than the HOA would have allowed anybody else to. Legally, it is within her property, and I could not do jack about it aside from complain to the HOA, who would do nothing against Karen. The other thing about her that I want to mention is that she seems to have some vendetta against trees. Like, I don't know what tree has slighted her in the past to make her hate all of them, but she just does. I don't think she realizes that without them we would not have oxygen, but trying to teach somebody like her basic facts is harder than trying to teach my cat advanced calculus. She finds reasons for the HOA to give people fines for their trees and basically force them to get the trees removed. I know this seems random, but I swear it will be an important little fact for later in the story. She hated one of my trees that was huge and had a ton of personal complaints about it over the years. She claimed that the shade from it made it so she couldn't get any sun, which was only true for a couple hours in the morning. She claimed that it was getting in the way of the power lines, which was another flat-out lie, since it was not anywhere near them. Finally, she came up with something solid enough that I got an official letter from the HOA regarding my tree. I was being told that I had to remove it due to the fact that it had the potential of falling and damaging Karen's home. I guess this was technically not a lie, but any tree can in theory fall down and damage property. It wasn't as if mine was dead or bending all the way, looking menacing. It was just a normal tree that Karen decided was the worst thing in the world. I did not get the tree cut down or pay the attached fine they wanted me to because I knew it was all just crap. I told Karen as much to her face when I saw her, and she did not like getting spoken back to, hitting me with the classic lines of, "Do you know who I am?" and "I'm on the HOA board, you know." Basically phrases that might have been intimidating back in preschool, but not so much in the real world. I should have expected Karen to do something big and stupid, and well, she did. She had called a tree cutting service herself and told them that the HOA had paperwork showing that my tree needed to be removed. I heard the noise and went out to see what they were doing and attempted to stop them. They had valid paperwork, and even threats of calling the police for them trespassing didn't get them to stop removing my tree. I don't know if this makes me a little bit of a Karen, but I did call the police and had them send an officer over. They told me that their paperwork was valid and they couldn't technically stop them from doing their job. I could only sit and watch as my tree was removed and nothing was left of it by the time they were done. I caught Karen watching and smiling, and I was sure to flip her off a few times during the whole ordeal. I was not gonna take this sitting down, and I called a lawyer to see if there was any basis for a lawsuit. I found out that there not only was a basis, but lawyers that specialized in tree law, which I didn't even know was a thing. I had to get an arborist to come out and look at where the tree was and use photos and records to find out what it was and what it was worth. I could not just sue if I didn't know how much I was suing for. I don't know jack about trees, but it turns out that the type I had was used a lot for furniture building, and due to the age and quality and size, it would have been worth around $75,000. With that figure and having it in writing, I was ready to take them to court for my money. Karen did not think that I was any type of threat either, and probably seeing what I was suing for, assumed that I was insane. To her, trees were not worth anything, and she did try and give me a counter offer that is too funny not to share. She offered me $100 as compensation, but not actually giving me the money. No, she said she would take $100 off of the fines that I owed the HOA. I found that to be an insult and refused to even acknowledge it. I was going to let things play out in court, and I knew that I had enough to nail them. Also, random note that they had sent me the bill for what they paid for the tree removal, like they thought I was actually gonna pay for it. In court, their arguments were found to have no basis, while mine all had papers and the expert opinion of the arborist. I was granted the full amount I was asking for, but oh boy, I was not done with Karen yet. Her war on trees was about to come back to bite her, as the trees were going to fight back theoretically. I didn't want to pay their fines, and the civil case had nothing to do with that. Instead, my lawyer agreed to reach out to environmental groups and basically tell off Karen for having dozens of healthy trees removed in the neighborhood. So now my HOA was under another lawsuit and an investigation for breaking state tree laws. It turned out that in my state, you cannot remove healthy trees without an assessment and permission that they were not getting. The HOA was under fire, and they decided to let Karen have all the faults for things going on. Of course, all of the homeowners she screwed over got involved, and it was the most beautiful crap show I'd ever seen. Even after the HOA had removed Karen from the board, they were getting letters and gone after, because at the end of the day, everything she did had the HOA stamp of approval on it. The HOA and Karen ended up getting tons of fines they had to pay to the state, as well as reimbursing the homeowners that were affected by their actions. The HOA was in such deep water that they had no choice but to totally dissolve before they were basically protested out of the neighborhood. I wish I could say this ended with Karen moving away or having some shame about what happened, but she still lives next to me and is still a Karen, so she will forever think that she was in the right. My tree might be gone, but she cannot relax outside without getting dirty looks from everybody that passes by. Everybody knows who and what she is, and without the power of the HOA, she is a nobody, and I know deep down that she hates that. Edit, people are asking me a lot in the comments if the tree company got in any trouble, and well, they didn't, because technically they didn't do anything wrong as their paperwork was correct. It was the HOA's fault for allowing it to go through, but the company themselves didn't do anything legally wrong, just kind of morally. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. I'm sending a special shout out to all teachers who are starting the new school year. So I was at a training yesterday morning, 24 hours prior my wife broke her ankle. Pretty badly too, like it had to be reset. I was with her all day that day, and yesterday during the training she was recovering from her surgery while I learn how to use IXL, a math program that's pretty easy to figure out for the most part. The night before the training, my wife and I discussed the financial aspect of missing days, and though I took the day off when she broke her ankle, obviously, we both decided that I would go to the aforementioned yesterday's IXL training. I get there a minute early, or 14 minutes late according to the USAF, and situate myself. I open up all the websites they say to, do the Padlet AI welcome page drawing they request of me, and get ahead of the program. The rest of the room is jibber-jabbing as the presenter the other district personnel meander around the room. I see a text from my mother-in-law, and as she's at the hospital with my wife, I decide to look at it. Gina, my wife, is asking about my pay. Her phone got an alert about a payment. My Rapid card has an alert that goes to her phone, but her phone died before she could see how much it was. I decide to log into my access page to see how much and tell her whether we are covered for the deductible that they haven't collected yet. It literally took like 20 seconds to do this, and of course this is when Miss Low Glasses decides to pretend that she's my teacher. She pokes me on the shoulder repeatedly. I'm pretty sure she thinks she's tapping me, but it's uber aggressive and says, "You need to look at the screen she's showing you." I start to comment back by saying, "Sorry, I was just," when she interrupted me abruptly, shouting enough for God and Satan to hear, "You need to get your priorities straight," and tell my malicious compliance. I was so embarrassed and pissed at the same time. Pissed, maybe. It was totally uncalled for. It was when everybody was jibber-jabbing, and it was to check on an important time-sensitive thing. It made me realize that yes, I do need to get my priorities straight. I replied just as loudly as I had everyone's ear now, "You know what? I do need to get my priorities straight. My wife is in the hospital. I'll be leaving now." And I walked out. The lady looking at me through her lowered glasses scoffed, and the other district personnel pulled her aside and chided her as I walked out. One of my homies yelled out, "Love you, OP, it's gonna be fine, text me," as I left. More to follow. And the next one is another malicious compliance story. This happened many years ago when I was a field organizer and I ended up with a manager who had explicitly said she didn't want to manage anybody, but a series of events meant that I was her direct report. In our initial meeting, I went over everything I'd been doing up to that point, where to find my weekly, monthly, quarterly and annual reports, and how to keep track of where I'd be. Also on how to give me feedback between our monthly check-ins. She was not used to working with field organizers and was shocked that I was not going to be in the office except for meetings and to turn in my reports. And it's fine to not know things, but then she went and said, "If you're not in the office where I can see you, how will I know that you're working? You could be doing anything you want and I would never know." Over and above what kinds of assumption that makes about my character, whether or not someone looks like they are working is a terrible metric for measuring what work is actually getting done. However, I kept that to myself. Rather innocently, I offered to have my task tracking app send her an email whenever I accomplished a task. She agreed, and the thing about me is, I'm a fast worker, I always have been. It's been a bone of contention with people who I work with. I create backlogs. I make other people feel weird about how much they do in the day. I used to get upset about this and wish everybody was as fast as me. By this time in my career though, I learned to keep it to myself and spend some portion of my day pacing myself with others or to find jobs where my pace was not that strange. This job though was the latter. We were doing underfunded community-driven work where the failure or success of a project sometimes meant that the people we served could not pay their rent or afford food. So I was blazingly fast. After 3 days of hundreds of emails a day notifying her the second I completed a task, my boss decided that she actually didn't need to know whether I was working or not. We actually became good friends after that because we realized we had a lot in common, and we teamed up against the other bosses who kept making crappy decisions and putting us in bad places because they knew we were both competent enough to solve their problems for them. Neither of us work there anymore. We have moved on to much better things, but we are still friends today. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Car revenge done right. I grew up and still live in a city in Massachusetts, and around me are many small, quaint, one-horse New England towns. Sherborne fits this to a T. As a teenager, I learned to drive slowly through this town, as right on the main drag there was a small combined fire and police station with a cruiser always out front keeping an eye on everyone and everything. 20 years later, I am now a married father of 2 small children, and it is the Sunday family drive to the in-laws, but driving back home after the visit through country roads, I noticed a car on my butt, so I sped up a bit, but he was back tailgating me. I looked in the mirror and I see a smiling kid, his arm out the window and his girl right close next to him. Then he does it again and he's getting a real kick out of his game with my rear bumper. I am pissed at this point, but I am now the adult, so I cannot be giving him the finger, taping the brakes, slowing down, especially with my family in the car, but my route is now taking me through Sherborne with him still tailgating. Sure enough, there's the cruiser, parked as always. I pull up quickly next to him, roll my window down and said, "Officer, see that car? He's right on my rear." He looks at my small children in the backseat and he says, "I got him," and he is off. I was just able to see him catching up with the car before I had to turn off. I get home and I am still pissed. I call the police station, explain the story to the dispatcher and ask if I needed to file a complaint. His response was, "No need to, sir. The driver has wants and warrants on him. He is now under arrest and we are towing the car as I speak." To this day, I still love telling this story. And the next one is titled, "Revenge Can Be Sweet." So, about 8 years ago, I worked for a company where I designed control panels for large site operations. I was an electrical designer. While the company was a global competitor, our office was about 100 people and our electrical design team consisted of me and another designer, a few electrical engineers and our immediate supervisor. Our supervisor was a great guy that was always willing to impart wisdom, but he was not big on confrontation. The other designer and I had about 10 years experience in the field each, so we were well versed in not only design, but we could also perform a lot of engineering functions, even though we did not have that fancy piece of paper. After about 2 years of working there, they hired an engineer who was fresh out of school and just got his FE. And guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess FE is some kind of diploma or certificate. Anyway, he was one of those holier-than-thou types who thought that because he had the piece of paper, he knew everything and would speak down on anyone who was below him. The three of us were assigned a very large project together. During this project, the other designer and I would try to point out issues with the design, but we were screamed at, belittled and berated because, "You don't know, you're not engineers. Just shut up and do what you're told." On several occasions, we were both pulled into the boss's office and questioned why these mistakes were made despite the fact that we knew better. We told him about the issues with the engineer, the boss pulled him into the office and put him in his place. Everything was good for about 3 months and then it all started over again. This time we went to HR to express our issues. Again, he was pulled into the office and talked to and things settled down again. This time it only lasted about a month. By this point, the other designer and I decided that we had enough. We both said to each other that we wanted to leave and started interviewing with other companies. We were both hired at different companies and left within 2 weeks of each other, leaving our office with no electrical designers and a massive project that needed to be worked on. We came to find out that about 6 months after we left, they were forced to shut down the whole office because they could no longer support projects in their entirety because they had no one to do electrical design. Moral of the story, don't think that just because you have a piece of paper that you know more than someone who's got years of experience in the field but doesn't have that piece of paper. And don't let one bad apple shut down an entire office and cost 100 other people their jobs. The next one is titled, "Terrible Neighbor." So I've lived in this apartment for just over a year and I've interacted with my neighbor 3 times. Each time it's for him to complain at me that I am supposedly slamming doors and making the walls shake, and it's really disturbing. On the first interaction, I apologized profusely, said I had no idea and said, "Oh, you should have left me a note or something, I don't want to be inconsiderate." And said that I would be more careful and asked if there were any other issues. He basically kept repeating, "Yeah, it just shakes the whole wall and it's really disturbing." I was horrified that I had committed the heinous sin of bothering somebody. I'm a recovering doormat and also really confused because I don't slam doors ever. I did not even realize he was talking about the front door at first, and my thought was, what is he talking about? All the interior doors are propped open because cat. I have spent way too much time thinking about this and figured out that when the wind blows a certain direction, there is negative air pressure in the hallway, which pulls the front door closed with some force, and unless you carefully hold the handle the entire way and make the door close quietly. The neighbor's apartment is a mirror image, so his door opens the other way, and he may not realize this. It also seems to be more of a problem when I have my balcony door open. I have legitimately tried to train myself to never let the front door swing closed. You should see me on my hands and knees dragging groceries in and sliding them across the kitchen floor because I don't want to walk in with both hands full and let the front door slam swing behind me. But basic human doing your best only goes so far, and there have been 2 more times that I forgot and he came out to complain at me. After the second interaction, I was really bothered that he still seemed to think I was slamming the door deliberately, and I left a note on his door apologizing again, explaining about the wind thing and reiterating that I would do my best and it was not intentional. The third interaction went like this. I forgot my keys, ran back inside to get them off the counter, and allowed the door to slam shut behind me. He came out as I was locking my door. Him, you're doing it again. Me, I'm sorry, I'm doing my best. Him, it's incredibly disturbing. It makes the whole wall shake. Me, I'm doing my best. What more do you want me to do? Him, stop slamming the door. He went back inside and I yelled after him, you know it's not on purpose, right? You know it's the wind. I'm a little oversensitive to people telling me that my best is not good enough. My neighbor does not appreciate my efforts, so I will no longer be making any. As of yesterday, I've started letting the door swing itself closed every single time. I may even be opening my balcony door ahead of time, and I think the dog needs a few extra walks today. And whoops, looks like I forgot something from my car. He is already upset. He has made a noise complaint to the office, but I let them know about the situation before beginning my petty revenge. As far as I can see, I am perfectly within my rights to allow my front door to swing closed. You know, like everybody else does. And that is what I'll be doing until he apologizes for being an ungrateful, perfectionist jerk. Or until I move out in February. And on that note, it's time to take the dog out. And yeah, ripe stars, I gotta say, I would go crazy with a neighbor like that, especially when it is about noise that you don't really have much of an impact on. I mean, sometimes I've lived in apartments in my life where it sounded like the neighbors would be moving furniture or drilling holes at all hours of the day, but in this case it seems that OP was really reasonable. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads, and also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.